live now, and what I want to talk with you guys about is the deal that doesn't translate. The deal that doesn't translate. Before I dive into that, though, if you have not yet subscribed to my newsletter and you are an entrepreneur, CEO, visionary leader, you are someone who you're not just doing this to do it, right? You're doing it for a purpose, and you want to make sure that what you are building has the ability to multiply, that you can monetize and leverage the heck out of that thing, okay? And a lot of times too, by leveraging, we can leverage it in global markets. So on that note, make sure that you go to sodabarrows.com, my website, and subscribe to my newsletter. It is free. I drop nuggets there. I share any promos with you guys that I may have coming up, so that you can get in the door, get in where you fit in, basically, is what I hear a lot of people say sometimes, okay? So keep your legacies unlocked and join the newsletter. It's free of charge. Go to sodabarrows.com and you'll see a pop-up where you are able to just go ahead and subscribe to the newsletter. So let's dive in really quick to the deal that doesn't translate. There are so many small businesses, and let me just give you some context, because small business are companies who are generating 40 million or less. Okay, so that, like, just do that as some context, right? So even if I say small, you like the big little cousin, right? You small, but you ain't small. But in the context of small business in the US, if you're generating 40 million or less, you are considered a small business. When we are looking at other markets to determine how can we further leverage and monetize our brands, the services that we have under those, the products that we are creating and possibly putting into the market, a lot of times people are looking outside of their current domestic area. So the US, or within your state, within your region. Sometimes people get opportunities, or they actively search for opportunities outside of that. Now, what this really means about your deal not translating is an agreement that you sign in the States for your company is not necessarily going to protect you in global markets, right? It's not going to protect you in global waters. The reason being is because those markets have their own rules and regulations that they follow within whatever particular industry. And so it's very, very, very important that when you look into opportunities of expanding your brand abroad, that you also connect with attorneys who are doing work on an international basis, but who also have relationships with international lawyers to help keep your brand protected in those marketplaces. Another thing that you need to understand about your deal not translating is we have to understand the language of that deal. All right. So let's break it down in terms of contract. What happens if you have a dispute in a foreign market, right? A foreign jurisdiction that you don't operate there primarily. You probably have never been there, but maybe you sign an agreement that has jurisdiction within that global market, in that global jurisdiction, and now you have to respond to this. You have to show up maybe to an arbitration hearing or a court hearing. You have to potentially serve a defendant in that market if you were the plaintiff and you want to pursue action to keep your brand, like literally enforce your rights on your brand or whatever it is that you're doing, your rights within your contract. You have to understand how to navigate that space. So let me tell you a quick story, because some years ago, a lot of people don't know this about me. I have been an international lawyer before I thought I was an international lawyer. So I represented this client who lived in Jerusalem. And one of the defendants was actually in Jerusalem. So I had to make sure that I served the defendant according to Jerusalem rules and customs in that area. Y'all, it was so wild. Like, that was my very, very first experience in dealing with international litigation, if you would, although I wasn't in that jurisdiction for full litigation. The litigation was in the state of Illinois. However, we had a party, actually two parties, who lived and resided in Jerusalem, but their contract had an issue in Illinois. So Illinois was the primary jurisdiction, but for us to make these parties aware of the litigation, I had to find someone in Jerusalem and to make sure that I properly served that person in Jerusalem. So deals don't always translate the way that you think that they would just because you are an American company, or because you may have this false idea about American companies having more, I don't know, I guess power. But that's such a fallacy, right? Or that people are just going to bend over backwards because it is a company. Not necessarily. So at the end of the day, you have to be mindful about certain issues and how they will impact you, impact your business, impact your ability or inability to monetize, leverage, and or protect those brands, those services, or those products within a global space. So all that to say, not only do we need to think about the language of our deals, but we also need to think about the culture and the customs within global spaces or other markets that maybe we're trying to get into for the purposes of keeping our legacies on lock. And so, yeah, you got to keep that in. You have to keep that in mind. It's always a great thing to be forward thinking. And as an entrepreneur myself, I think it's a very freeing and powerful thing to be forward thinking, but at the same time, you also have to think about your protection and enforcement strategies, which are your legal strategies to protecting the brands and the legacy ultimately that you're working on. Okay, so we want to make sure that our deals translate. And I'm saying this because most of the people who I know that I'm connected to are primarily US based businesses. If you are in a space where you are considering expanding globally, that's something that we may be able to support you with. And the first thing that we would do for you is to make sure that you get all of your IP on lock. Sometimes people, they don't understand the value of intellectual property, and it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, when you have that intellectual property on lock, baby, you have a ram in the bush because you have an opportunity, you have an asset that you can monetize and that you can leverage over and over and over again. If you look at some of the richest families of, well, not of our time, but if you look at some of the richest families historically, it has been their intellectual property that has left a mark, created long legacies. Like, oh my gosh. Okay, so I have another story. So I'm not going to go into detail with this one, but I had an issue where I represented a plaintiff who was working for a very rich business owner out of California. And this business owner literally funded the company, the lifestyle, because they were an heir of a company who supplied all of the meat to a very popular fast food chain. All right. Now we're talking about somebody who was maybe the 8th or 10th generation. I think I'm remembering that correctly, but I just wanted to share that with you guys to understand. Yeah, it's a lot of sweat equity sometimes, most of the time, as the creator, as the visionary, as the person who is making something happen, building something to create that legacy. But if we set it up properly, if we protect it properly, and if we enforce our rights properly, and if we understand the jurisdictions and the markets and the global spaces that we may be going into, even if our brand makes it in that space before we do, knowing that there's time to act and that we have to jump on top of that to protect those brands, that's what is ultimately is important, right? Wealthy people don't look at legacies that's gonna, I don't know, maybe uphold the next generation or the next 2 generations. They look at how can what I'm building now lasts at least 100 years. That's where the legacy building takes place. That's how there's this owner out there that is like the 10th generation heir to this major rich family, because they built something to last 100 years or more. And we have to be in that same mindset. So again, if you have not yet subscribed to my newsletter, it is free. Make sure you go ahead and visit my website. Go to sldebarros.com. You will see a pop-up screen there asking you to join the newsletter. And it's all about keeping your legacy on lock. We are changing some things, and it's important for me as a visionary, also as a business owner, and as someone who cares about legacy and who desperately want to make sure that I leave something to last well beyond my time. I want to make sure that your legacy is also unlocked. So go ahead, subscribe. It is absolutely free, and I'll see you inside. Go to sldebarros.com and subscribe today. All right, guys, take care. Make sure that your deal translates. Ciao.